This is Mommying While Muslim, recorded live and unedited. Watch as Zeba and Uzma record their podcast, see their reactions, and find out for yourself what all the buzz is about.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mommyingwhilemuslim podcast. This is Uzma Jaffrey. And we do have a little bit of an audio lag. So that is Zeba Hassan, apparently frozen on the screen, but she will be joining us in just a second. Remember, this is day 2 or day 3 of her vacation, and so she's at the beach, probably with not the best Wi-Fi right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and solo talk about you heard a little bit about our weeks yesterday because we talked about single momming under duress. And actually, my sister was on to talk about how she did not intend to single mommy, but the government stuck its hands into her business and made her a single mommy. And so on that leg, we're continuing with single motherhood because it's, such a large phenomenon in the United States, but also in the Muslim community worldwide, not just the Muslim American community here. So we decided that, hey, let's just do a double header this week and invite a guest on who has some experience on that. And on that leg, we have Horanissa Faryad joining us of the Sister Act podcast. She is one of, I believe, 3 co-hosts on there, and they talk all things interfaith. So she decided to grace us today and talk to us about her experiences with single motherhood. So thank you so much for joining us, Horanissa. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here with you and Zeba.
Yeah, no, eventually she'll join us like Joe's troubleshooting right now because she's really excited to talk to you too about this. And I just think it's
Absolutely.
so much more fun when there's 3 of us on and, a lot of times we don't agree and that's okay. I think that's what's beautiful about it. So usually what we start with is your mom story. So tell us a little bit about your kids, how old they are, and your momming philosophy.
Okay, so I have 4 daughters. My eldest is 20, then 18 and a half, and then almost 14 and almost 12. So I have
Oh,
a whole house
mashallah.
full of girls. They're with me 24/7. They don't see their dad. They haven't seen him in about 6 years, come
Oh, wow.
Halloween, actually. And so I've been raising them myself for the past almost over 6 years. And so it's
Mashallah.
been a ride. It's been a ride. Yeah,
Yeah.
alhamdulillah. My
So the
mommy
whole
philosophy.
pandemic thing really hasn't changed anything for you.
Well, yeah, no, not everyone's home, right? Like all the time.
Right.
I work from
Mhm.
home and they're doing their schoolwork from home. So it's kind of like everyone's in each other's face. But my eldest actually went back to VCU. She's actually the arts
Okay.
program. She's in her 3rd year in college. And so
Mashallah.
yeah, alhamdulillah. So she went back and I told her it's okay. Go, inshallah, just be, safe and take care of yourself and be mindful of what's going
Right.
on around you. You don't need to be going to anyone's parties or anything like that. She's smart about that. So alhamdulillah,
Oh, mashallah, good.
you've done half of it. You have another 2 years to go, and then you'll get your art degree and inshallah get your life on track as an adult. And that's what our job is, right? Just to raise them with skills that they can actually become resilient, not just in their faith, but also in the world. They need to be able to function as human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, tell us about because I think you kind of spoke to your parenting philosophy, which I absolutely love. Like, our job is not to force anything on our kids, but to teach them right from wrong so that when they go out into the world, they can do it on their own without us looking over their shoulder, which we love. But
Right.
since we're talking about the evolution of the Muslim family this month and closing up with you, tell us how your family dynamic changed and what your Muslim American family looked like before and how it looks now. How has that dynamic changed for you?
Yeah, it's changed a lot, and I think that anyone who's a single mom listening to this can attest to this, that it's your life literally turns upside down in a matter of days or sometimes minutes. So I got married when I was 20. I was extremely young. My then husband was almost 11 years older than me, and he was established. He went to law school, he had a CPA. I was born in Afghanistan, he's Pakistani. And so, for my dad, it didn't matter where he was from as long as he was Muslim. So the fact that he was established in that area was a plus for him. I didn't really get to know him that much. I didn't go out with him. I didn't see him outside of just the phone calls and him coming to my dad's house to, ask for my hand for like 6 months until he actually convinced my dad. And so
Mm.
then we got married and I had my first two daughters like right away. And that was when I was here in New York City. That's where I grew up. That's where I'm now, even though I don't live here. I'm visiting family right now. And you can see my Avienness behind me too.
That's your
And
mom's for
so
sure.
that's my sisters. And so we ended up he went into the IT field. We ended up moving to the Northern Virginia area in 2004. That's when I had my other two daughters. So by the time I was 30, I had all my four kids. And so, and I think that kind of helped that I had them so early on in my life. And then I saw just throughout the years him changing, getting into things that, as Muslims, we're kind of like, I don't know if that's okay. And so, but still, you try to work things out. You try to talk, have conversations, do whatever it is you can to try to make it work. But it just got worse at times as time went by. What kind of, you know, ended things or led up to the ending of the marriage was at January of 2014, he abandoned me with my four kids, emptied out the bank account. I had no way of paying my bills by myself because he was the primary breadwinner. And, I just worked at the masjid and I have my degree in elementary education and English literature. So I was the vice principal, but, you know, that wasn't a means to actually pay the bills,
Mhm.
right? It was just like this
Yeah.
uh, part-time job that I did because I just did not want to stay home and I'm not a homebody. So I ended up he ended up leaving and I had to figure things out. And then 2 months later he called no, he emailed me. He was in Costa Rica, it was a place we had gone 2 years before for our family vacation. And he emailed me and told me that he found Jesus on the beach of Costa Rica and he converted to Christianity, which I was like, okay, your life, you're right. But like, we're done even before this whole conversion thing, because I think the last straw would be someone abandoning you with four kids and no responsibility attached to it. So life pretty much went downhill from there for a little while in terms of just me having to sell my house, pulling my kids out of private school, trying to figure things out on my own, and working full time and making sure that my kids needs are met. And then about that Thanksgiving I came to New York City to visit my family because I'd moved my kids out of their room. Now they're in an apartment, and like life just literally turned upside down for them. And so we
Mhm.
moved into an apartment, and then I came to New York to visit that Thanksgiving. And my sister looked at my daughter, my youngest, as right when we walked through the door, and she said she's not right, like there's something wrong with her. And so for me, I thought she was just stressed out. She had lost weight. She was drinking a lot of water, going to the bathroom a lot, eating a lot, but
Ah,
losing weight. I never associated it with any kind of illness because normally if someone's sick, they pass out or they faint or they go into a coma or something happens, right? These symptoms for me were alien. So I called up my friend who's a doctor, actually Fatma, and she said, I think you should go get her blood work done. And so I took her into the emergency room here at was formerly known as Booth Memorial. Now it's New York Hospital. And they took her blood sugar. And the minute the thing beeped, the guy just grabbed her out of my arm and just rushed her in. And they just like IV'd her up. And they said, well, her blood sugar is so high, we can't even read it. And turns out
oh
that
my
she had
gosh.
type 1 diabetes and she had just turned 6 the month before. And for me, it was like, wait, what does that mean? Like, I don't even know how to adjust to even understanding what type 1 diabetes is for a 6-year old. And so she and I spent Thanksgiving at New York Hospital in New York City. They transferred her because they had a pediatric endocrinology department. And I had to learn how to give her insulin with the needle. I had to learn how to prick her. I had to like learn everything in 2 days. And it was just so much for me. It was kind of like, oh, great. Now I have to go through this too. But anyway, as a mom, you go through it and you learn and you put yourself through all of that. And I came back to my sister's house the same that night, and then the next day we drove back to Virginia with my four kids. And so that's life. That's what life has been like for her for the past 6 years. And so there's always adjustments. There's always adjustments, and the fact that my kids don't see their father is another issue. He chooses not to see them. And so that's another battle that you have to kind of overcome in terms of telling your kids that it's not them, that they're not the issue, that they're fine. And then, them being girls and not having a father figure in the house and not understanding what the male role model would be. So I try to expose them a lot to my brothers and other men that I know are good fathers and just good in general so that they see that there are good men out there. Yeah, I don't know if I answered
So
all of
I
the.
know you
You
well, I
did.
mean, first of all, it's I always when I hear these stories of single moms, honestly, it is a story of resilience and strength, really. Because, when I had first gotten married, my husband did work at least 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And then I did have to take care of the kids primarily alone a lot of the times. But the reality of the situation is I still had him to fall back on, right? So you
Mm,
always have that emotional support. So, so when other like married friends would be like, "Oh, I feel like a single mom half the time." I kind of took offense to that on some level because I'm like, it's not the same because at the end of the
it's not.
night, when I have to complain or if my kid is sick, like he will step up, even if he is working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. So I definitely don't
Absolutely.
think you can equate the two
You
things
can't.
together. That's first and foremost. You just can't. So, first of all, I have to also point out when you said that your husband found Jesus on the beach of Costa Rica, like Uzma's jaw was on the floor. I just was like, can we take a screenshot of that? I thought that was hilarious because that is such an interesting concept. And quite
Mhm.
frankly, if he did find Jesus and it brings him peace to his soul on some level, that's great. But my understanding of Jesus's teachings is that you don't abandon your four kids and you take care of them, but
Right.
I will leave my judgment on the side and let it go and not say that, even though I am being judgmental.
Absolutely,
But
absolutely.
I'm just being real and honest with you. But first of all, I just want to commend you because I know that it's hard, and to now be a role model for a lot of other people in your situation. I love that, and I love hearing your story. And I was hoping you were gonna talk a little bit about this, but the one thing I wanted to ask you specifically is there are unfortunately a lot of single moms out there right now. So why do you feel your particular situation is unique, separate and apart from your husband converting to a different religion and literally choosing not to have anything to do with you or your girls?
I think, you know, it's hard to say that it's unique or different or, I have something that other people don't because somehow we're all intertwined with our struggles as single moms and how we're put in a situation where we have to really do things on our own. I think for me the biggest thing that I've learned about myself is management of my time and my energy and my emotions because I'm the mom and a dad and I have to figure out
Hmm.
how that works. Then I have a full-time job. I'm the voice and face of the second largest masjid in the United States. And then I'm also the music director of the only masjid youth choir in the United States. And then I
Hmm.
founded this podcast. And so there's all these other things that I'm a part of and that's because I'm passionate about those things and I think it's important for Muslim women in general to have a voice. And if I can speak on their behalf for a little bit, I think I can bring awareness to that. And that's what I'm trying to do is that we're not we're not our divorce status. We're not our singleness, and I hate when people use the word broken home. Like I don't even know what that means. As if it's
Hmm.
like broken and then it needs to get fixed or someone has to come and do something about it. That's not the issue. We need to be resilient in our way of life, right? We have to figure things out. We have to figure out how things are actually working and being there for one another. And I think for me, I love the fact that I can speak on my story for other women because it's really difficult for Muslim women to talk about their divorce, to talk about the struggles that they're going through, and for fear of many different reasons. For me, it's mainly because my, you know, my ex is not part of the picture and he's not here and he's not part of my community, so these things are always something that becomes problematic for other people, but for me it's really not that big of a deal because I can talk about it. And the discussion is that I've had this discussion with my kids even before that I will be talking about these things, and they're very well aware of what that means, and what the struggles of that life is. So they support me in that, and I think that's the best part of what it is that I'm doing.
I love that, because like you said, a lot of people are not able to talk about their divorces, and in a lot of, in inter communities or sub communities within the Muslim American community at large, there's still so much shame associated with divorce, which is
Mhm.
ridiculous because I think I was listening to a podcast recently about divorce statistics and I looked them up and it's saying something like there's a 50% divorce rate. But then when I looked at the statistics, and I'm just going to kind of share them real quick because I thought it was interesting from like almost 20 years. So 2000 to 2018, there was like pretty much steadily over 2 million marriages a year. And it went to from like 8 to 6 per thousand marriages. And that actually declined. So more people are not living in a traditional marriage, but they're cohabitating in some way, which is like by most states is like you're legally married. But then on the other hand, from 2002 to 2018, your rate of divorces went from 4 to 2.9 per thousand. So the divorce rate is actually decreased a little bit, offset by the fact that there were like almost 940,000 divorces back in 2000, but in 2018 there were 782, which probably speaks to the fact that more Americans are cohabitating outside of like legal marriage. But, the
Mhm.
divorce rate is actually lower in America. And so why is there such shame associated with it? Why do girls still have to hear, oh, if you don't marry within the Muslim community, then you're going to end up divorced, like they're divorcing, like the outside non-Muslim
Mhm.
community gets divorced more than we do, which is totally unequivocally untrue. So, um, you know, speaking to those statistics, I'm like, I love that you are somebody who is speaking about it and open about it and saying it is common. I still think what's unique is your specific situation, and I've now lifted my jaw up off the floor and cleaned the slobber. I think that's really unique. Your life, you're right. That's amazing. That's something that we should all say. So I really appreciate that you were able to deal with it and say that to him in the end. But did you have any
Mhm.
inkling? Because I've heard you talk about your divorce on another podcast before, I think on your own podcast. So, did you see any signs that you want to share with people? Because maybe this is something that's going to
Mhm.
happen. Because actually, 23% of Muslim Americans are, I don't want to say defecting, but they're leaving the religion. For multitude of reasons. About 25% are converting to Islam and 23% are leaving Islam. So it kind of balances out. But it's not that uncommon if the quarter of our population is doing it. So did you see signs that could maybe help somebody who is listening?
I think that 23% are mostly the younger generation. So I wasn't expecting someone like in his late 40s to all of a sudden say, I found Jesus and I'm baptized, I have no sins. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, how did that happen? No, there actually weren't any signs of conversion. That hit me like a truck just came. But like he was getting involved in other things that I think, we as Muslims who are a little bit more adherent to the rules would have been like, I don't know about that. So, I saw that happening. But this whole Jesus thing and converting was not even in the picture. He had told me to send him his passport because he wanted to like go and find himself. So I was like, okay, like that's so convenient. I mean, I want to find myself too, but I'm here with 4 kids. How's that going to happen? I was
Yeah.
like, why don't you just come and take
Uh-huh.
care of them so I can go find myself? But what
Hmm.
ended up happening, like, after the conversion was that, he became extremely hostile against Islam and saying a lot of bad things about our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and doing all these things. And then so I went to Imam Majid, who's my boss, and he's my imam, and he's my wali. Like, I appointed him as a guardian because as a single mom with girls, you do need a male figure in the community who has your back, right? All my brothers are here in
Hmm.
New York, and so being alone and being a woman, you're exposed to so many other things that you really don't want to be exposed to. So you need to have that protection around you. So I went to Imam Majid, and he knew what was going on, and he sat me down and he said, Hudi, listen, if he comes back to Islam, he has to well, first he told me like, okay, he left Islam, so your nikah is nullified immediately. You're no longer married. He's not your husband. There's no relationship. So I knew that from before, but I needed to hear it from him. So I was like, okay, fine,
Mhm.
that's it is what it is. We'll move forward with that. And then he said a couple of weeks later that, if let's say he wants to come back to Islam and you want to reconcile and you want to get back together, you'll have to do another nikah. And I looked at him and I said, Allah took me out of the fire, you want me to throw myself back in? Hell no, we're done.
You're
Like,
like,
I'm
hell
good.
no.
Like, I said those
Exactly.
words and he
That's
just
how
looked at
I
me and he
feel.
started laughing and he's like, okay, khalas, like that conversation is all. I was like, what? I was
You're
like,
like, no.
we're so done. I was like, he can keep moving. Like, I don't care what he does, what he prays to, what he doesn't pray to. Like, that is not even the question. But there was no way I was going to let him walk away from his financial responsibility to the kids, which was a whole nother fiasco of events that happened. But, I learned what my legal rights were and I did my own studying and I took him to court myself. And he's at a point right now, if he doesn't pay by the 21st, his license gets suspended and they're going to put an arrest warrant out. And that's what you have to do. So, a lot of women think that you can't do these things by yourself. I have no legal background. Like, I didn't go to law school. He actually did. I don't know any of that, but I was like, there's no way that I'm going to let you walk out on the kids and then walk out of your financial responsibility. So, I had to hire a private detective, had to find out where he was,
Wow.
serve him paperwork. So I had to do all that filing myself. And so if I can do it, I think all other women can do it too. But there was no way I was going to let that slip because there's four of them. One has a medical issue. Luckily, with my job, I have insurance, and I can pay for her insulin and her needles and her pricker strips and her sensors and all that stuff. He has to actually reimburse me like 82% of that, and I make sure he does that. So you just have to make sure that you know what the law is and how that affects you, because a lot of men don't do that, and a lot of women don't know how to maneuver around that. So I was like, if I can set an example for other women to, like, stand up and fight for their rights and take them to court, then I'm going to do it.
I love that.
That's
Yeah, don't
actually
let them get
that,
away with it.
yeah.
No,
I
not at
totally
all.
agree. And like you said, in Islam, we have our own rights. And I that's the one thing I do want to dispel. And we can add the links to some of those things because I think a lot of people that are outside of the faith don't understand how much rights we as women have within a marriage,
Hmm.
and that we have, the opportunity to exercise those at any given point in time. But, as being a role model to your four girls, like, and they're a little bit older and possibly, maybe they'll find somebody. And what kind of advice would you give them knowing the things that you know about marriage now that either you would do differently or you would do the same? Or how would you, or how can we talk to our daughters specifically about kind of, letting yourself fall in love, but protecting yourself as well?
Absolutely. And there's a fine line in that, right? I think our generation, we were never taught these things. It was just kind of like you meet someone, you like them, and then you get married, and then later you find out like, oh my God, there's 15 red flags. What am I going to do about them? Really, you can't do anything at that point. One thing I tell my daughters is education is really key and it's extremely important. Luckily, I had an education background where I was able to go back to work and I was able to, make something for myself. And a lot of women who are single, who are at home, who don't have an education to fall back on, who don't have a career to fall back on, end up staying in abusive marriages because there's really nowhere else to go. And being alone outside with no income coming in, and exes sometimes make it extremely difficult to even pay child support or give alimony. And who has the time and energy and effort and money to fight that? So women end up staying in an abusive relationship because of that. So I've told all my girls, you are not getting away with not going to college. I don't care what you study. You have to find something that you like, that you're willing to work at for yourself. You have to have your own income. You have to have your own money. And that's not because, oh, you want to be this super duper independent woman who's going to call her shots and not have a companion, because it doesn't work like that. You have to meet halfway with your significant other in telling them how you want to live your life and how you want to come together. So there has to be that common communication with your future husband in terms of how you're going to live your life, right? I mean, Islamically, it is his job to pay the bills, but in today's society, sometimes you need double income, which is fine, right? But
Hmm.
you still need to have something for yourself. You still need to be able to fall back on your own feet okay, what if divorce doesn't happen, but he ends up getting into an accident and becoming paralyzed? What are you going to do? How are you going to pay the bills? How are you going to take care of your kids? You need to think about all these things. And so, my older two are in college now. My eldest is in her third year. Um, my second one started now, and she's going into nursing, inshallah. And that's one thing I've always told them is that you have to be able to stand up on your own feet as women in this country. And I'm trying to set that example for them, that I'm a single mom of four kids and I'm doing all these other things by myself and raising them, that it can be done. You just have to be able to believe in yourself, know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you, that God is always going to take care of you. And I can attest to that on so many different levels, at so many times, that God has always been there for me. When you think like, oh wait, what's going to happen in this situation? You don't see a way out, and then he opens four doors. And I've seen it myself in my situation. And so it's that belief in pushing yourself in the rightful things in this dunya, but also knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to be there for you, that you have to rely on him, and that you have to be observant of those things. Because at the end of the day, this life is a test, right? Like what I'm going through, what each of you are going through, and what everybody else is going through is a test about where we're going to end up, what's going to happen to us in the afterlife. And that's something also that I tell my kids, is that don't worry about what you're going through in this dunya, because this day will pass. It's about where you want to end up in the akhirah. But you have to be able to take care of yourself in this dunya as well.
Here, here. Yeah, that's how it is in my mom's side of the family. Like girls aren't allowed to get married until they get a college degree. And that
Mm.
was kind of a rule set by my grandmother, who had a third grade education. And she was like, no, I don't care what you get a bachelor's in, but you're going to, because I think there was an experience where there was a young widow. She was widowed at 17 and had nothing, like no education and no
Mm.
skills. And so the family kind of collectively took care of her for a really long time until her son came of age. So independence, financial independence primarily was really, really important on my mom's side of the family, at least. And that's kind of what was taught. So I have a question. Like, it seems like you have it all together and you've done your job, but how has the community been in response to, eventually the end of your marriage and, the story behind your husband's conversion? Like, what stupid things have they said, or how have they reacted?
Okay, so I live in a really awesome community. I have to say that I have not
Alhamdulillah.
had that many people say dumb things to me. And most people know me from my work at Adam Center, and they know that I work with Imam Majid, and they know that, I represent Adams when it comes to outside organizations. I'm going and speaking on panels, I'm talking about Islam. So my single mother status actually has not hindered my work at all. If anything, it's actually helped in destigma, taking away the stigma that's associated with single Muslim mothers, who everybody is like, oh, poor thing, she has to raise her kids by herself. She really can't do anything. And here I'm like, yeah, well, I have to go make a video for the census, or I have to, do the recording for TSA's, training module for 45,000 of their TSA workers. And it's going to be me, my face, my hijab in front of them, telling them how to interact with the American Muslim community. So to say that we are broken, or we're, any less than anybody else, is an understatement. It doesn't matter whether you're a single mom or you're in a relationship and you're married. You can do whatever it is you want to do. And when they shifted me over from my vice principal position to head of outreach, public relations, and interfaith at Adams, it was after my divorce. It wasn't before. So if it was an issue that they saw it as a problem, having a single mother being the voice and face of the second largest masjid in the United States, it would have been an issue then. But it wasn't. They actually saw what I was able to do. They wanted me in this position, and I've been doing it for over 3 years, and I'm enjoying every bit of it. It's really right up my alley in terms of how it fits my personality and how I interact with people, because I am an extrovert. So it's fun having conversations with people and letting them know who we are as an American Muslim. And it also helps the fact that I grew up here and I understand both cultures and how they actually can mesh together. I've just had some of my friends really. One of my friend was so sad. I think she was going to cry, like the whole every time she would see me. She was like, look, she just looked like she was going to like pass out from being so in distress. And she kept saying, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry, so sorry. I'm like, girl, get yourself together. Like, it's really not that bad. Like, I was like, I don't know why you're so sad. Like, I'm here smiling, and she's just like, oh no, I can't believe it. I'm so sorry. I'm like, look, my life, my identity is not around my marriage status. That's just a part of
Mm.
who I am. I'm so much more than that. There's so much more of me that you don't get
Yeah,
to see outside of my single mother title or my married title, right? Like we can all attest to that, right? Like our marriage is just a part of,
absolutely.
of who we are. We're so much more than that. And when we see Muslim women speaking out and having conversations and talking about their divorce and what that means and what they're going through, it's important. Now, my situation is extremely unique in the fact that no one's ever come up to me or made fun of me or made me feel bad because I'm part of the community. People see my face on at Adams. They see it on in the community, email stuff and whatever goes on our YouTube channel, so they know who I am. But there are other women who do get, ridiculed. They're put down. People don't know how to interact with them. And one thing I tell my friends who are married is, check up on your single mother friends,
Mm-hmm.
because they will never come to you and say, "I need help," because you don't want to be put in that situation. It's really demeaning for
Mm-hmm.
single mothers to say I need help, but usually they do need help. And the help they need is not for you to pay their bills or anything like that, although that is an issue, but a lot of them won't even ask for that. It's more about, "Hey, I'm taking my kids to the park. Is it okay if your two sons come? I can take them." That's great. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're relieving them of a few hours where their kids can go play with their friends without them having to go because they're worried about cooking or cleaning or work or whatever it is. Stuff like that, checking up on them, like, "Hey, I went to this restaurant, I picked up some food for you, I'm going to drop it off." Like just small things like that. Really, don't ask them what they need, just do it. you know if you're doing
Hmm.
something for yourself and for your kids, do it for your single mom friends, because they need that help too, and they're never going to ask for it.
I love that. That is really, really good advice. Absolutely. Check on your sisters, everybody.
Yeah.
And
So,
DoorDash makes it so easy because you can send a meal out of
Yeah,
I
state
love
now.
DoorDash.
that's so true. See,
Oh
there
my
you
God,
go.
that is so,
Yeah.
so
Thing-
true. DoorDash is like
Everything
my
in there.
best friend these days.
I do
So
DoorDash and
okay,
edible
so
arrangements. I'm like, boom, send those.
exactly. Exactly. So I don't know if you guys, I'm just going to ask you a little bit.
Mhm.
Enough time has now passed between, your divorce and you've been a single mom for a while. Have you thought about potentially, opening the door for a possible other relationship or being open and receptive to something coming your way? Like, are you on Minder? I don't know. Like I just heard about Minder
Oh gosh, I
recently.
hope not.
I just have to ask you.
I am open to it because I think companionship is so important for everyone. And our Dean emphasizes that, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us into pairs. He didn't make us into living by yourself, especially if your marriage ended. And if we look during the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, women
Salaams.
would get divorced and then somebody else would marry them. There was no concept of, being single for such a
Yes.
long time. Women were always taken care of because they understood that that was part of a societal function and a responsibility. Nowadays, it's not so much. To be honest with you, from what I see in the context of getting remarried, it's a really funny thing that I've come across in terms of finding, because as someone who's trying to practice Islam as much as I can, even though I'm flawed in so many things, it's really funny because majority of Muslim men who are practicing do not want single mothers, and then the men who are
Mm-hmm.
not so observant, they don't care if you have kids, like they might miss a prayer here or there, or they might you know not be observant, but they're like, "Oh, I don't care if you're a single mom as long as you're a good person, but these are my things," right? So like you're put in this thing of like, what is it that you want? And then you end up seeing single moms also, or even women, Muslim women who have never gotten married, marrying outside of Islam, because within Islam there's so many caveats and so many restrictions and so many hurdles you have to go through with, you want this type of man, but then he doesn't want you because you have kids. And then the one that you're like, "Oh, I don't know," because he doesn't pray all the time. He's like, "I don't have a problem with you," but you're like, "Wait a minute, I don't want to raise you now either." So there's
Yeah,
like this
exactly.
whole thing that you have to kind of be like, "Wait, this is like more difficult than it should be." To be honest, I'm
Hmm.
like, wish there was like a program you could just like type in what you want and ta-da, like they come out. But obviously in the real world it doesn't work that way. But I tell all my single mom friends, like, go out there, find someone. Don't put yourself off just because society's telling you otherwise. There's nothing wrong with that. And this is another stigma that we have to jump over either.
Mm-hmm.
Like, jump over also is this: getting back into your life, finding a companion, finding someone you can grow old with, whom you can love, who can love you, who can take care of each other, and who will respect your kids. Like, I'm not expecting the guy to come and father my children. They already have a father. He just needs to be respectful and take care of me and be respectful to my kids. But this is such a new thing for Muslim men my age, that it's a lot of hurdles to go over. Or the men are like extremely young, like they're young, like 7, 8 years younger than me, and I'm like, yeah, no, like I'm done having kids. So like,
It
like
can
no, I
work.
don't
I've
have
seen it
four.
work with
I'm
the
like,
younger
look,
men. So it's all right to
you
be a
can adopt
cougar
one
once
of
in a
them.
while. If, like you said, the religious guys don't want to
Hmm.
marry a single mom, right?
Yeah.
And what
Hmm.
I find ironic about it is, how the men always want to fulfill the sunnah, but like fulfill the sunnah
Not
of
this
four
one.
wives, and not the
Not this
sunnah
one.
of marrying a divorcee.
No, all the
SubhanAllah. It's
sunnahs
like, okay,
except
dude.
the ones with the kids, and like you get asked really ridiculous questions like, does your ex pay child support? How much does he pay? And I'm like, that's none of your business. At that point, I'm like, out. I'm like, sorry,
Yeah.
Mm,
this is such an inappropriate question. It has nothing to do with you, So there is this constant, like you said, things of that we have to go through, right? Like you're talking about, um you know finding someone, and then not who want to have someone who follows the sunnah, or they're trying to find someone who is, at least practicing to their level or something like that, but then they end up saying, well, no, not so much Islamic that way, God forbid, I don't want to, do those things. I don't want a single mother. I don't want a mother, a wife with kids, or, so it's a lot of different things. So I think each situation is unique, but I'm pretty sure that all the single moms who are out there looking, or who are open to getting remarried, this is a huge, huge issue. And I think we have to really look at how we're raising our sons, and the impact that we're putting on them in terms of what qualifies as a wife, and reassessing
Yes.
how we're raising them, because we can see, at least from some of the men that are around my age, that they have been raised up with this issue of, you don't marry a divorced single mom. You don't,
right.
you need to find a girl who's has none of these, baggages that they call the children, which I'm like, wow. How do you see that as bad? I'm like, I have 4 girls. It's like 4 keys to Jannah. Like, and they're almost like
Hmm.
all grown. Like, it's like a free ride, right?
Yeah. It's like a ready-made
So,
package.
exactly. Like, if you only thought about Sunnah the right way, you would actually see this. But it's there. It's just a really interesting thing, to go through as a single mom. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what I've experienced is when divorced moms get remarried,
Mm-hmm.
and the elders in the community, like our parents' generation, is like, whoa, well, look at that, like they're
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
shocked. Like it's
Yeah.
out, like their mind just exploded because they couldn't imagine that happening. Because in their generation, the generations before probably didn't. Like you could be
It
widowed.
wouldn't. Yeah.
There were husbands taken as refugees or murdered
Mhm.
as refugees. Like, became single moms all under duress, but they still never remarried. Like that great aunt I was talking about who got widowed at 17, never remarried, which I
Yeah.
think is absolutely ridiculous, because 17, you're just starting to realize
Yeah.
what your needs are. You haven't even like graduated to that thought yet, I feel like.
Not even. Yeah.
So there's a lot, like as you spoke to it, like Zeba and I both have 3 sons, and I
Yeah.
think it's up to us to change that backwards mentality, that
Absolutely.
divorce does not define anybody. It's
Yeah.
not a failure on anybody's part. I think what's more commonly, like when a husband and wife divorce, the woman gets a lot of backlash. I think in that situation you're very unique, because nobody in the community could have lifted a finger against you because your husband defected against Islam, or left Islam. But for the majority of women, there's still that negative response to her, that social
Mhm.
ostracization that happens, and social isolation
Mhm.
that she undergoes because of what happened. But if, like, Zeba and I can change how we raise our sons to accept everybody
Absolutely.
regardless of their history, and to realize that our histories make us, because I feel
Absolutely.
like your ovaries tripled in size after your divorce and you became everything.
Yeah.
That's the kind
Absolutely.
of women we want our sons to be with. We want them to be with strong women, not like the past generations who would be like, no, no, marry a girl who's uneducated and who doesn't know anything, because then
Mhm.
she will be submissive and subversive and we can control her. We can groom her. We can groom her
That's
to our
true.
family. And that's not your job. That was her
Yeah.
parents. They already did their job. Let them send you an adult,
Exactly.
not another daughter to raise. Yeah, I love it.
Exactly. And
Sorry,
we
Zeba,
have
did
to
you have
go.
something?
No, I love hearing because I that was what I was gonna say too. Like, I sometimes feel like it's more of a responsibility for moms right now with sons, specifically for that reason. We're trying to break the cycle of that type of expectation, if that makes sense. Because
Mhm.
whether or not our parents were woke or whatever, or more progressive than the previous generation, there is that underlying misogynistic tendency that I just don't even think people realize is kind of ingrained in the culture, right? Whereas like my mom, I love her to death, but she had three daughters and a son. It was kind of our jobs to kind of help with my brother and clean and cook and do those types of quote unquote more feminine or female type of jobs or responsibilities. But I definitely know because of that, I'm trying to be more mindful and having my son, be more aware and more helpful. Granted, he almost broke my washing machine when he overstuffed it the other day. And he does do the general clean out the once a week. They're all a work in progress, but my concept is, you know, your sister is not going to be the one taking care of you. Your
Mhm.
mom, I will take care of you to the extent that I can because you're one of four kids. And that's just something I enjoy doing personally, but you have to know how to do certain things because at the end of the day, your wife is not going to be there to do that stuff for you. She is going to be your equal and your partner. She's not going to be an extension of me as your mother, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an important thing to um like stop and think about. Like we don't really think about it when we're doing it, right? We're just going on
Mhm.
our daily ritual and going here, going there, saying this, saying that, but we don't stop and think about what we're saying and how that actually impacts our children's view on who they are and how they're viewing relationships. And like even when someone gets a divorce in the family, how we talk about them, how we talk about the divorce, that impacts their view on divorce as well.
Yes.
And they're
Mhm.
constantly pushing it as a this negative stigma thing that follows that person till the end of time. It's funny how you said about grandmas becoming like, oh my god, so surprised someone gets remarried. When my divorce happened, one of my family members actually came up to me and said, well, now your life is all about raising your children. And I looked at her like, I'm
Hmm.
only 35. Like, when did that like I didn't
Yes.
sign up for this. Like you just signed my death warrant. Like your life
Yeah.
is
Yes.
over. No, it's just about you raising these kids. And I'm like, I didn't sign up for raising my kids by myself. It was just handed to me that
Yeah.
way. And then I
Right.
realized how much culture impacts us and how much we let culture dictate our lives. And at that point I was like, no, I'm gonna make my own decisions. I'm gonna do what's right for me and my girls. I don't really care what anybody else says. And you gotta do it.
Yeah. And who knows, this is maybe your ticket to living your best life, right? Because it sounds
Yeah,
like your life only
exactly.
got better after that.
It did. It did. Alhamdulillah. I think for me, my divorce was like this. Like I said, I was in the fire. I got out, and my man just like, "Do you want to go back in?" I was like, "No." And I'm doing things that I've wanted to do. I'm not a homebody per se to just stay home and run a household only. I'm involved in so many different projects at the same time because I'm passionate about those things, and no one's there to tell me I can't do it. I'm in my
Mhm.
own schedule. I'm on my own schedule. I make my own decisions. I'm my own boss. And it feels good to be able to do that without having someone nagging and chewing your head off and telling you can't, or putting you down, or making you feel bad about yourself. That's not marriage. That's just like a life
Mhm.
sentence.
Yes.
You're just waiting for
Well,
your
I was just going
execution.
to say that when you have a good relationship, the one thing I do want to say is that that partner wants to support you. It's not all
Absolutely.
roses and fairy tales and all bubbles and rainbows and unicorns, but for the most part, the partner wants to support you in what you have to do and elevates you. Like, you're not going to always agree on the same things, but if that person is there to help you lead your best life, then you're in a good relationship. And to your point, if that's
Exactly.
not happening, then that's
Yeah.
probably a sign that it's not
Yeah.
the best fit for you,
Exactly.
and that's just
And that's
my
what
two
you have to
cents for
look
what it
for.
worth because yeah, because marriage is
And that's what
not
you have to look
supposed to be this death sentence or this like albatross around your
for.
neck
Yeah.
all the time. It's
Right.
it's supposed to be, and I should say, everybody has ups and downs, including
Mhm.
myself. So I want to be open and honest about that. But to the extent that both parties want to work on it and make it a better situation for both people, then,
Absolutely.
it's worth
And that's what you're
doing that.
supposed to
So I,
look
I
for,
did
right?
want to say that.
Someone who's going to support you, someone who's going to be your cheerleader, your best
Right.
cheerleader on the squad, someone who's going to give you ideas, who you can bounce ideas off of. And that's what makes marriage work. I mean, if we look at our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's example and just his relationship with Khadija alone, you're like, wow, like that is there's so many examples in that relationship that we can learn from. And I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did that for a reason on so many accounts. I mean, Khadija was a twice widowed single mom before he married her, much older than him. And the love that he had for her, when he would see her necklace he would start crying, and how she supported him. That all of these are examples for us to use in how we're defining marriage and how we're defining our relationship and the kind of person we're supposed to look for. And I completely 100% agree with you, Zeba, that it has to be someone who's going to support you and who's going to be there for you at the end of the day.
So that
Yep.
having been said,
And oh,
COVID
go
is
ahead.
driving me nuts with my husband. Like even the sound of him chewing next to me is driving me insane. So we have to be real about that too, okay? So I love him to
I
death.
think COVID is like pushing everyone, to some corner in
I
their house.
know.
Want to be left alone.
I'm like,
Don't
can you
bother
go
me.
eat over there, please? Because you're driving me insane.
Yeah. And
But,
actually,
That's
because
too
again,
taking
it's not all
COVID,
roses and fairy tales and rainbows, okay?
yeah. And COVID's actually has aided a lot in the divorce rates already. Just like two
mm.
weeks ago, we got about 7 divorce applications in 1 week. You
Hmm.
Oh,
know, people
subhanAllah.
That's
being
not a
Crazy.
surprise.
relationships being forced to stay home together during this time, and people not being able to get therapy or not being able to get space from one another, and it's just trickling down to people just calling it quits, and it's sad, but
You're talking
but
about
it's
at
happening.
Adams Center. There's an application for divorce?
Well, we're masjid, so we're always getting applications for marriages and divorce, right? So
Oh,
about 2 weeks ago or something like that, there was like 7 cases in 1 week. That's a lot.
wow.
That's a
That
lot.
is.
But this is because of COVID, right? COVID's aiding the relationships that are already rocky in making decisions
Hmm.
of, oh my God, I really can't live with you. Like I was going to work and I
Hmm.
wasn't with you. So I was able to like to have time away. Now it's like I'm with you. I can only imagine what old age is gonna be like living with you 24/7. So it's just not working. And we have to do better in giving people I think counseling and really helping them through
Hmm.
this time, because COVID is not easy for a lot of people. And there's domestic violence issues and child abuse issues that are
Mhm.
really not being reported, and it's affecting a lot of people. So, check up on your friends, please.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. I think that's really great advice. And we thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Absolutely.
Because
Well,
honestly, I think I did not hear that part about Costa Rica in the past. And so that's why I was a little, what? That came out of nowhere.
I have to go back
Because
and
on
look
your
at your
last
face.
podcast, you didn't talk about that.
Oh, it was priceless because I knew the story a little bit. I was like, oh, when Uzma hears this,
No
man, that's
clue.
going to be
Yeah.
I gotta go
shocking.
back to the
I
recording and see
Note
your
to
love
face.
self,
that.
don't tell Uzma ahead of time.
We like to shock you once in
That's
a
really
while.
good. Yeah, yeah.
Thank
No,
you so
shocking
much.
is really good. It really is shocking, and it is so encouraging to know that despite bombs like that, we can survive.
Hmm.
This pandemic is nothing. You got this because
Yeah,
you've been doing it already. And I
yeah.
think as an example to our other single moms out there, like you are one of our pinnacles. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And any links that you have, some of those statistics on divorce will be in our show notes. So any links that you have, or you want to tell people where they can find you, and we'll put those show links up in our show notes.
Sure, sure, absolutely. I'll send them over to you. My podcast. It's Sister Act.
But tell our
I have
audience about it.
So I started this podcast in February because I do interfaith work, and I, mostly deal with people who are not Muslim, and I talk about our community as the American Muslim people that live in this country. And so I decided to start this podcast with myself as the Muslim, and I have a female rabbi, Susan Shankman from the Washington Hebrew congregation, and we brought in Dr. Sabrina Den, who is she has her PhD in baptism, you know her whole PhD is about the tradition of the Baptist movement. And so
Mm.
she's Black, and she's very open and very bubbly, and we have just a great time talking about our faith, our resiliency, our life, and what that means, because a lot of times people don't get to hear who we are as American Muslims, or women in general. We don't really get the stage, we don't get the seat,
Mhm.
we're sidelined. And I saw that a lot with the faith work that I'm doing. No matter where I went, they would always want the males to come and speak, and the women were just sidelined. Or
Mhm.
they would have one female speaker, and she would just get like 2 minutes to speak. That frustrated me a lot. So I figured out what platform I can come up with, that I can, put our voice out there. And I felt that this multi faith, three faith um, podcast will really give the rest of the world a kind of glimpse of who we are as women of faith from different faith groups, but we could work together, do things together, and then talk about our faith and our life issues, and how our